from FHE Audio. Mr. and Mrs. Ganson lived in a lonely cabin at the edge of the woods. They hadn't lived there all their lives. They moved to the cabin 4 weeks ago to start a new life. However, this wasn't the new life they were looking for. Early one morning, Mrs. Ganson was making breakfast. It was a fine morning. The birds sang songs of sun and joy. Mrs. Ganson was yelling, "Honey, time for breakfast. Hurry so you don't miss work." Mr. Ganson still wouldn't wake up. Mrs. Ganson ran in their room and found him on the floor. She shook him. He was still motionless. She turned him over and checked for a pulse. Nothing. She screamed, but her voice was not heard through the trees. She called the police. When the police arrived, they found a red bump on Mr. Ganson's forehead. They suspected the death was an accident. "Mr. Ganson was going to get a drink, or whatever, when he tripped on this stone," said the policeman as he picked up a small rock the size of a prune, "and hit the corner of the nightstand. He got a serious concussion and, well, died." "I heard a bump last night. I figured it was something on the roof, or a branch tapping the side of the house," said Mrs. Ganson. "We'll keep you company tonight, if you like," said the policeman. "No, I think I'll be okay," Mrs. Ganson said nervously. "I'll be going. Call us for any other problems." "Goodbye, sir." The policeman drove away, disappearing into the trees. That night, Mrs. Ganson couldn't sleep. She lay awake, pondering about everything. As she did, the door to her room creaked open. A pale white figure swayed into the room. Its eyes were as red as cherries. Its expression was terrifying. It smiled a peculiar smile. The smile was almost too big to fit the creature's face, showing all of its chipped, cracked, and some missing yellow teeth. It looked at the phone. Mrs. Ganson picked it up, shaking. On the phone, her friend said, "Did you know your stepsister died? Sad story. The cars crashed." Mrs. Ganson dropped the phone and her mouth dropped open. The creature smiled even bigger and laughed. Not a happy or evil laugh, a crazy one. It spun around, showing scars. "I'm back," it whispered. For this to make sense, I have to tell you something. Mr. and Mrs. Ganson moved to this house to start a new life, so that they could get away from Tina, Mrs. Ganson's stepsister. You see, Tina was in love with Mr. Ganson. Mrs. Ganson stole his heart one day, but Tina vowed that if she could not have him, no one could. She swore she'd get revenge on them one day. Mr. Ganson was not accidentally killed. Tina just got her revenge. And Mrs. Ganson was reported dead the next day.